Welcome to Encouragement Corner, everyone.
And so what's our topic for today?
Today we are going to be talking about dark places. How about that?
Oh no, that sounds like a pretty deep
topic, huh?
Yeah, pretty deep topic. Dark places. Wow. So what comes to mind when you think about dark places?
When I think about dark places, the first thing that comes to my mind is a hiding place. Like somewhere I can hide, somewhere where I'm not seen. It's if I'm going to define dark places, it's
Right.
a hole that I've dug deep for myself that I can, again, hide in. And it's almost like an abyss of constant negativity, frustration, pain. It's a feeling of being entrapped in an empty, dark place.
I guess in my mind I try to think of, what does that look like, or how does that play out in everyday life? Like what would be some of the characteristics, I guess, of somebody that's in a dark place? Because we get we have people come to us a lot that are dealing with all types of issues that I would consider a dark place, right? Like, example, somebody that's in an addiction,
Mm-hmm.
right? To me, that would be a dark place.
Yeah, the loneliness could be a dark place.
Yeah, you see that a lot.
Right. Feeling of being unloved. There are so many dark places in people's lives. And I can honestly talk about my dark place, give a brief overview of my dark place. As a child, I was in a dark place. And I was in a dark place because I felt as though my mother did not love me. Now, that's how I felt.
Right.
As I got older, I knew that wasn't true. I knew that she loved me. She loved us more than herself, I'm sure. But
your perception,
your perception
is your reality.
That's it. And I felt that she didn't love me. So I became withdrawn within myself. Mm-hmm. And being withdrawn within myself, I created another person to protect that withdrawn little girl who was hurting and who was feeling unloved and who was feeling alone. And so as I grew older, then I realized that this little girl was growing with me into adulthood, and that couldn't be. I had to escape that dark place.
And I think that's how a lot of times we get drawn into, or maybe pushed into a dark place, right? It's because of something that happened, in a time when we felt vulnerable or when we felt powerless,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of push our personality, creates this dark place to kind of protect that vulnerable person inside of us, right, from any type of harm, any further harm or danger, right? But I think that what ends up happening is that at some point, like you say, that little girl that was pushed into a dark place grows up to be an adult, right? And then at some point, that behavior begins to manifest, right?
Yes.
And typically it's a negative manifestation.
Yes, it is. When you grow with that, you become bitter and angry, and there are a lot of emotions, negative emotions that come out of you, and it's reflected upon your relationships with other people. How about feeling of loneliness when you have a house full of people? Right. How somebody might say, well, how are you lonely and you have a house full of people? You have your children, you have your husband, you have your wife, you have a house full of, so how are you still lonely?
Well, because it's easy to feel like, I'm sorry, that no one really understands, who you really are or what you're really like, what's important to you. And I think a lot of times if you are afraid to voice that opinion for the fear of, somebody's negative reaction.
Right.
So a lot of times I know, if you feel like a lot of times if you're the caregiver, if you're the giver, and then you can feel like, man, nobody ever gives back to me.
Yeah.
But then you put up this persona that you're so strong,
right,
that you don't need anything,
right,
and so you kind of created that whole world for yourself.
And when you say, this persona that you're, strong, you don't need anything, growing with that extra protection, if you will, it makes you strong, and so sometimes that is a reality. You do become so strong and stubborn, and that you like, I don't need anyone to help me do this. I don't need, and then if you don't talk about it, if you don't get it out, then it begins to grow inside of you.
But then that can still have negative effects
Definitely,
on relationships,
definitely,
right?
Definitely. It will, because I always say what's in you will come out of you. So
and it does.
Eventually, you cannot hide the real forever. You have to think about the emotional pain that's being endured while you're in this dark place. There's a lot of emotional pain that you go through. And so whenever you emotionally attack, then you tend to put that off on someone else. And it's usually the ones who are closest to you, And so you find yourself in a place of emotional turmoil. There's a lot of disruption going on.
So would you say like those are the, I guess, the negative effects of dark places?
Yes.
That, those behaviors come out in different ways.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Sometimes it comes out in addictions.
Yes.
Right? Sometimes it comes out in, just secrets, right? Secret sins. That we harbor,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Different attitudes, and because when we talk about secret sins, it's not just physical things,
right,
like pornography and stuff like that, but also jealousy, envy,
yes, yes.
And all of these come from this whole time that we spend in isolation, thinking that we're protecting ourselves, when at some point, and I'm sure you can attest to this, at some point you have to do some self-reflection and try to figure out, if it's a relationship thing, why do all my relationships end this way? It can't always be, if you have 5 failed relationships, what's the common denominator? At some point you have to do some self-reflection, I think.
Right. But you have to realize that you're in a dark place. Some people don't even know that they're in a dark place. It has become such a part of their life, such a part of them as a person, as an individual, that it's the norm, that their reality is a dark place. So how do you handle that? How do you pull that out of someone when that's their norm, when that's their reality?
But I think that's what I'm saying. I think that at some point you have to look at the negative feedback that you're getting from your behaviors, right? If all of your relationships end this way,
but what
if all of your if every job you get, it's your boss's fault, or if it's somebody you know what I mean?
But what if they say, man, it's not me, it's them, they crazy? Because in my mind, I'm right. In my mind, I'm comfortable where I am. In my mind, I'm not the one with the issue. everyone else is. So that's why I say you have to recognize, you have to acknowledge, you have to accept that you are in a dark place, and it's difficult to break through that. You know, it's difficult to see that if you don't sit there and you don't do it, like you said, a self-reflection. If you don't self-reflect, then, and if you don't look at everything around you, all the people, your relationships, how, you know, there's so much negativity, there's so much chaos in your life. If you don't look at all of that and think that, you know what, maybe it is me.
And I think too, you can tell me what you think, but I believe too, like having somebody in your life that you trust enough to be honest with you, right? And that can tell you, nah, that's you.
Yeah. But then even in that, people can tell you, you know, your friends or whomever, someone close to you can say, you know, it's you, it's not them. They might get mad at that person.
But that's what I mean. Having somebody in your life that you respect enough, that you trust enough, that can speak into your life,
and you'll accept that. You'll receive that from them.
Receive that. You won't receive it as criticism,
right,
as negative
right,
criticism,
right,
but as constructive criticism.
So even if it hurts, I still accept it because I trust you.
Because I trust that person. And I know that they wouldn't be telling me this just to hurt my feelings.
Right.
Like they're really like, wow, if so and so said this, then that must be, I must really need to stop and think about it.
Right. We don't want to hear the truth. We don't want to know, you know, what you really think. A lot of people say, you know, be honest with me. Tell me the truth. Mm-hmm. You know, I want to know, you know, no, most people really don't, because the first thing that happens when someone tells them the truth about themselves, about what they see, then the other person on the receiving end gets angry and gets upset. And that goes back to my grandmother used to always say, the truth hurts. And it really does. Think about it. If somebody tell you the truth and it's true, it's really true about you, you feel some kind of way. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult to accept that.
And that's why we don't get, you know, that's why we don't allow those certain people the ability to speak into our life, because we're afraid of what they might tell us, that we end up having to face something about ourselves that we really don't want to face, because it brings us back to, right, it kind of exposes that person that we've been trying to hide. Yes. Or that little girl that got hurt all those years ago, that you've been hiding away in a corner. And now all of a sudden the behavior that you're acting out points back to that little girl, and forces you to have to deal with or come face to face with what drove you in the dark place in the beginning.
So now you have to go all the way back into your dark place. You gotta bob and weave, you know, through your life, through the course of your life, and go back into that dark place and figure out, you know, how did I get here?
Well, think about it, right? If it was a childhood trauma, mm-hmm. if it was some type of abuse, whether physical or emotional abuse, mm-hmm. that drove you to a dark corner, that could be a scary thing, right? To have to go back,
right?
And you know, because in your mind, you probably feel like, oh, I'm over that. That happened to me when I was this age, but look at what I've done. I'm strong now.
But and that comes because you pushed it aside. You never dealt with it. You never addressed it. You just kind of covered it up, you know. And so it's like in your subconscious, and anything that someone may say, the person who you trust come into and say something which is the truth, it triggers it.
Right. Because even though it's in your subconscious, it still comes out in your behavior.
Right.
You're still acting it out in your relationships. And so yeah, I think that you have to, at some point, and that may be even getting some professional help, right? Like if you were a victim of, you know, physical abuse or mental abuse, then, you know, you might have to see a professional. And I'm sorry, but in the African American community, mm-hmm. we're not really. That's not really our first line of, you know, self-help is to go see a psychiatrist or somebody like that, a professional. But I think in many times you need to. Right. I don't think there's anything wrong with getting a professional's help in dealing with some emotional traumas that you've been through.
So we have to look at again, how did I get here? And we have to talk about that. How did I get here? And then how do I overcome? Once I figure out how I got here, then how do I conquer this dark place? How do I overcome this dark place? And so we have to understand that there's a process that we must go through, and we have to go through this step by step by step. And sometimes it takes years to break through that. It takes years to come out of that dark place. It depends on the person. It depends on the trauma. It depends on how deeply rooted it is. There are a lot of avenues that we have to consider when we're talking about breaking free.
Ooh. This sounds like we might need a part 2.
Yeah,
of dark places.
I think we do need a part 2 because there's so much more that we really, really need to cover in this session.
So how about we do that? How about we go ahead and end this segment, and just rely on the note that it's going to require some self-reflection, maybe having someone that you trust to speak into your life when it comes to dealing with dark places. But how about we come back and do another segment on just what does it really take to come out?
Sounds good to me. Sounds good. We'll do that. So we'll come back and we will see you in part 2 of Dark Places. Thank you for joining us in Encouragement Corner.
All right. Until next time.